Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Resistance Live. It's 17th of June, 2025. I know it feels like it's been forever since we were here, but it hasn't been. It's just been an incredibly crazy few days. I want to thank everybody who was here for the Stealth Activism webinar yesterday, which went really well. But I will just tell you that the breaking news, particularly over the last 24 hours, has been a lot to take. And if you are freaked out, scared, concerned, kind of, I don't know, worried, all of that is very reasonable. And you're not alone. So we're going to go through all of it today. It's quite a lot, just quite a lot. So first things first, today for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a white shirt with a gray cardigan over top. My hair is pulled back. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I'm in front of my bookshelf and my yellow utility cart, as always, and coming to you from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. So the biggest thing right now, in a swath of terrible things to worry about, is what's happening in the Middle East. So as everybody knows by now, Israel started an unprovoked bombing attack against Iran a couple of days ago on the eve of Trump leaving for the G7 summit. And at the G7 summit, Trump was asked to sign a document essentially like criticizing Israel for undertaking the attack and promising essentially not to give them help or much help. And being very kind of like top level about this. And he refused at first, and then he signed on to it initially, but not before he had announced that he was leaving the G7 2 days early to return to Washington and, wanting people in the Situation Room. And then we found out that there were air tankers, meaning airplanes that can refuel jets in midair, taking off across the Atlantic. And then this morning, we've had a whole series of like really crazy stuff go down. And that's leaving aside the fact that he kind of told everybody in Tehran to evacuate. For those who don't know, Tehran has a metropolitan area of about 17 million people. Okay. There's 9 million people in New York City. There's no way you can evacuate 17 million people from a greater metropolitan area immediately. It's impossible. All that thing did was kind of like cause panic. So this morning, he's done a couple of like really even crazier things. The most recent incarnation of which is posting what is apparently a text message that he got from Mike Huckabee, who is, of course, the current U.S. ambassador to Israel, notwithstanding the fact that he's nuts, essentially comparing Trump to Truman in 1945, deciding whether or not to drop the bomb on Hiroshima. If this makes you nervous, you're not alone in that either. And one of the things that I think is causing a lot of consternation right now is that, of course, to his own base, Trump campaigned on no more wars. And so one of the things that's kind of interesting to watch it as a sort of silver lining of this incredibly chaotic moment is that there are a large number of MAGA influencers who are now calling for Trump's impeachment. I'm not kidding about this, actually. Like, I've watched the footage of this stuff. We have people saying that this isn't what they voted for, that this isn't what MAGA is supposed to represent. And the only person who's apparently backing up Trump, is Laura Loomer, who has apparently posted on Twitter this morning that MAGA is whatever Trump says it is. But a large number of the people who are actually influencers in the disinformation bubble of the right wing are souring very quickly on Trump potentially getting the U.S. involved in this bombing campaign. And so it's a very strange moment. Then on top of that, we have this development where Thomas Massie, who is, of course, a part of the Freedom Caucus, very far right-wing figure, submitting a resolution in Congress that Trump cannot engage in any military action in Iran without the approval of Congress. And Massie has asked for bipartisan support on that. So there's a whole series of very strange things happening around this. And, I know that there's going to be a lot of bitterness about the fact that, like, oh, this is the moment that people decided to abandon MAGA. But, I just have to say I'll take it where I can get it. I will say, though, that the risk of all of this, I'm as unsettled about it as everybody else. And I don't have any great words of wisdom beyond the fact that, unfortunately, this is beyond our control. Trump is elected as the president. He has access to the nuclear codes. Bibi Netanyahu, who is a war criminal, is a friend of his. And these actions are rash, unnecessary, deadly. And I want to reiterate to everyone else that I think this is really important to note, because, there were some comments this morning on the Patreon feed that really got me thinking about it. This is not a distraction. An unprovoked bombing attack against another nation is not a distraction. Like, we already know that they have killed people who were civilians, right? We already know that. And we know that Israel has had the backing of the United States and probably our military warfare for this. So I have very deep concerns about it. And obviously nobody wants a nuclear war. But we have a madman at the helm. And so my best advice to all of you, because, I know there were some people on the feed this morning that were like, I'm protesting, I'm organizing where I live, I'm donating to organizations that I care about, I'm showing up for my friends and family. Like, what else am I supposed to do? Do I just have to sit by and watch the world go up in flames? And, the answer I have to that is, like, actually, you don't have to just sit by and watch it, that it is really okay. And I said this yesterday as a part of our stealth activism webinar, to not watch it. Okay. I will just tell you all that there have been multiple times in the last week where I've hit my limit. And one of the things that I think is really important to be aware of here is that living through these current times and the current way in which we receive information is overwhelming to anyone's central nervous system. That includes people who are immersed in it 24/7 as a part of their job, right? I have had moments where I'm like, I'm done. Like, I can't look at this anymore right now. I need rest, or I need to go hang out with my kids, or I'm going to go binge watch some mindless show on Netflix, because I can't hold the anxiety that is being produced in me as a result of this. So I just want to remind everybody that, every great organizer in American history since the civil rights movement has talked about the fact that if we don't rest, we lose. Okay. And so, this is not a moment to just allow yourself to be completely swept under by the terrifying nature of what we're experiencing right now. It's a moment to see it for what it is very clearly, process it, make decisions accordingly, but don't allow yourself to get into that space of panic in your own home in front of your phone. Okay. That's not healthy for anybody. All right. And the unfortunate fact is that while I certainly would encourage anyone, I'm really annoyed at the fact that we have to keep calling people on the most basic shit, frankly. Can I just say that? I'm bothered by it. Mariam Kaba has said this whole thing about how, we shouldn't have to call our electeds to tell them to do the right thing. And I agree with that. I actually think that having to call your electeds every single day to get them to do the right thing because they're so dependent on polling is stupid. We pay their salaries, they work for us. They should know what they're supposed to do. If I had to call somebody who was working for me every day to tell them what they should do, I would fire that person, right? But nonetheless, I think it is very important at this moment to call and ask for folks to sign on to this resolution. AOC has apparently signed on to Thomas Massey's resolution. And, I'm just going to say this, there was a time before George W. Bush where, the federal government couldn't engage in any form of military action without congressional approval. Entering a war certainly is something that you're not supposed to do without congressional approval. And so this is a moment to, make sure that we are advocating for folks to do the right thing. But also, I think it's very important to make your voices heard in other ways, right? Because the other thing is, as I said, there are cracks in the MAGA veneer right now. And that creates opportunities to talk about what people voted for and what they didn't vote for. And so don't miss those opportunities either. Okay. One other thing, there were people who suggested, and I think this is ridiculous, but there are people who suggested that Trump left the G7 just because he didn't want to be there. And I'm sorry, but I actually think this is actually a crisis that he's enjoying. And he doesn't, he can hang around at the G7 and get fed and waited on hand and foot and monopolize press time and get the attention that he so desperately craves. I think he left the G7 because Bibi wanted him to. And all of this from the perspective of what he's up to is a sign of his instability, frankly. So, I'm going to remind everybody he's not that smart. He's not, there's no 4D chess happening here, right? It really is as chaotic as it looks like. Okay. All right. So let's talk about a couple of other things. No Kings was a wild success. we had a great event here. I've loved hearing from all of you about how things went where you were, because I know that turnout, even in places like Boise, Idaho, where I have staff, where it was shocking and really great. And so, I really think for the most part, this went off without a hitch, right? There are a couple of things I'm paying attention to, particularly the situation in Salt Lake City, which I know many of you heard about, where apparently some 5051 organizers hired military vets to do security without, from what it appears, at least right now, based on Marissa Cobas's reporting this morning, it appears they didn't actually vet these people or find out if they had any movement-based security training. Somebody showed up with a gun, as you are lawfully allowed to do in Utah. Again, a protester in an open carry state carrying a gun. These folks opened fire, the security opened fire and murdered somebody. And what ended up happening was that the non-white person carrying the gun has now been charged with murder. And it's a situation where I just have to remind people, like, it is really important to know who is organizing the event that you are at. Because if they are not doing the right things, like, people can get hurt. And we have enough problems right now with what the cops are doing, the National Guard is doing in California, right? Those of you who were watching how it all went down in LA, I don't think you could possibly have missed the fact that that was an entirely peaceful demonstration until the cops decided not to make it that way. And we really don't need more threat, right? It's really important that movement organizers know what they're doing with regard to issues of de-escalation and safety and the like. Simply hiring vets with guns is not a good idea. But on the whole, No Kings was amazing. And, I've heard from so many of you that, it really was a wonderful event. It was where we were. We got drenched to the skin because it was pouring rain, but we really enjoyed ours. I will just remind everybody that there was a No Kings debrief call last night. The next event is going to be July 17th, which is the anniversary of John Lewis's passing. And the name of the event is Get In Some Good Trouble, which I love. I love the branding of it. I love that it is an honor to John Lewis, who, of course, many of us consider to be sort of an icon. We don't even consider it. He is an icon of the civil rights movement, and certainly an icon for, getting in the kind of trouble that moves the needle. So all of that is very important. Now, lots of questions this morning on the Patreon feed about the 3.5% number. So I have to say a couple of things about this because, there are debates about this number. Okay. So just to go back on it for a second, there was a study that was done that purported to show that when 3.5% of the population of a given place is deeply invested in social change, that social change can happen very rapidly. Lots of people now arguing over the crowd sizes of No Kings to see whether or not we've hit the 3.5% mark. But I have to point something out to you all, okay? It's not about the number of people that show up at one protest or one rally or on one day, okay? The 3.5% number is about people who are actively committed to moving the needle, okay? So what that means is that showing up at a rally is not enough. Like, the 3.5% of engagement that we need is about people on the ground who are doing community organizing where they live, who are mobilizing people where they live, who are doing the work of survival where they live consistently, like day in, day out change work. So there is nothing magical, in other words, about the 3.5% number. The thing that everybody needs to understand is that if we don't have engagement after an event like No Kings, if we don't have consistent hard work on the ground, not even turn out for rallies, because I have to say, while that's really important because it shows how many people are standing up and it gives people a sense of community, and certainly it shows pushback, the thing that really needs to happen now is that people do the thing that we've been talking about here for like years, which is getting deeply invested in building out where you live, right? Getting into trusted relationships where you live in your own community so that people will follow you to the next event, so that people will get deeply invested in their own capacity to make change, right? Because it's not just like 3.5% magically there's a revolution, right? Does everybody understand that? Like, it's work. It's work. This is work. And the work isn't always easy. Like, it's not always like fun. Over the weekend, I was reading about Ella Baker, who many of you may know, again, another really serious civil rights icon. Ella Baker did the work of going door to door to get people out to vote in counties in the South that were 80% Black, 20% white, but where Black people literally were being turned away at the polls consistently, refused the capacity to register. She and the people that she worked with went person by person, door by door, to make sure that Black folks went to register and were permitted to register and would wait to register no matter what the white folks in charge said. And that resulted in, once that campaign started, very rapid flip over of the actual representation in things like sheriff's offices and mayoral offices across the Black belt of the South. Okay. But Ella Baker didn't just show up at one rally. Like this is, the other thing I was reading about this weekend was SNCC, which many of you know. Again, that's how one of the ways in which John Lewis became John Lewis, right? The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that came out of the Civil Rights Movement started with 4 people at a lunch counter, then went into back rooms where Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committees were built out all over the country, right? Private, secret work. But you know what they did? Same story. They went door to door. They went college campus to college campus, right? Just showing up for a rally is not enough. It's a great moment, okay? But the way in which societal change moves is by then taking the energy of an event like No Kings and going home and doing the work, okay? It is, again, I got to tell you guys, one of the things that always makes me nervous about mass mobilizations in this era is that there's a lot of great feelings around it, and then the momentum doesn't carry forward. So the responsibility of everybody who was involved is to carry forward that momentum, right? Actually get invested and involved where you live if you are not already, okay? Start figuring out how your skill set can be applied to creating social change. Critically important, just absolutely critically important. Okay, we did have the absolutely tragic assassination of 2 Minnesota elected, we had the shooting of 2 Minnesota elected officials, the murder of 1 elected official and her husband, 2 other people shot who are miraculously going to survive despite being shot. I think I saw it something like 17 times by a man who is now in custody. We all know this story already. It's absolutely devastating. And we know that the shooter was a Trump supporter, very anti-abortion, kind of seems to have fallen into far-right propaganda very deeply in the last few years, and he's now under arrest. Okay, so folks asked me on the Patreon feed what we do about the kind of propaganda that the right wing has been churning out ever since. So I want to just clear something up, okay? It doesn't appear that the shooter ever met Mike Walls. Okay. There's this whole thing about how he was sitting on this advisory committee, and he was nominated by Mike Walls' predecessor, renominated by Walls thereafter. And, one of the things that I want Tim Walls, one of the things that I want people, God, my brain is not working today. I'm just fried from too much information. One of the things that I want people to understand is that there doesn't appear to be any link whatsoever between the governor and the shooter. Okay. Nonetheless, FarRight Propaganda went wild with this, including Senator Mike Lee, who claimed, not only, had no words of condolence, but went on a tear on Twitter about how, this was some kind of Marxist conspiracy. Tammy Baldwin has now taken Mike Lee down a notch. There's actually photographs of her confronting him in the Senate yesterday. And none of this is acceptable. And the question I was asked on Patreon is, what do we do about it? Well, you have to keep speaking the truth. But the other thing I'm just going to say right now that I think people really need to grasp is that the whole algorithm of Twitter, of X, and the whole algorithm of places like Facebook and Threads and other social media platforms that are controlled by the oligarchs who are all in for Trump is such that it's very hard to get traction against the disinformation, right? Now, if you have people in your own personal life who are buying all of this, and you want to have the time and the effort and you have the capacity for self-regulation to try to have a conversation about it, go ahead, okay? I do think it's important to point out the way in which this has taken over the ecosphere and the irresponsibility of it. Tammy Baldwin's staff did that. Tammy Baldwin herself did that, okay? Confronting one of the people who put this out there with the inhumanity of doing it, not to mention the lies. But from the perspective of can we overcome the algorithm on X as Elon has set it up? The answer to that is absolutely not. I mean, this is one reason why I haven't been on there since the December of the 2022 midterm elections. There's no way to cut through. It's like a Nazi bar. That's what it is right now. And the only voices that are heard are Nazis. So I think it is very important to just be mindful of where you are directing your energy. And as much as I am a fan of using deep canvassing strategies, if there is a possibility of creating some form of cognitive dissonance, I'm not going to sit here and tell you all that, like, you know, a bunch of people going on to X trying to combat what's happening over there on this issue is going to make a damn bit of difference, because it's not. Like, the algorithm is set up to make sure it can't. So very important to stay aware of what the truth is, and simultaneously to call it out in individual moments when you're able to do that. But I don't think there's any value in trying to organize people to kind of, like, you know, combat Facebook's algorithm and amplification of right-wing media to try to make a point. Okay. We have better things that we can be doing with our time. Just know, though, that there's really no doubt about the fact that this shooter was coming from a far right-wing perspective, and that, you know, essentially he was thrilled when Trump won. He is theirs. He's not ours. And I think it's really important that everybody know that. Okay. Some very good news on the legal front. 2 cases in the last 24 hours where NIH research grants, National Institutes of Health research grants, have been reinstated. Very critical stuff. Obvious, clear statements from the judge that the reason why those grants have been denied was because of racial and homophobic discrimination, and that it was unlawful. Similar decision on library and museum grants as well. That has now been barred also. So somebody asked, well, what happens next? Well, technically, because there's an injunction, the funds are supposed to issue as they were planned. If they don't, then we're in the field of contempt again. And all of you know how that works at this point, I think. There's a possibility of contempt proceedings if they don't do what they're supposed to do. And we'll see where that goes. Okay. The Trump parade. Okay. Everybody should take their joy where they can get it. You know, if your joy comes from watching Trump look like a miserable toddler while tanks squeak through the streets of Washington, D.C. and nobody attends it, I'm completely with you. You know, I took all of my schadenfreude from all of that and enjoyed it very much. And I think that, you know, part of the reason, frankly, why he's been so crazy the last couple of days is because his little birthday party did not go off as he wanted it to. It's an incredible waste of taxpayer money. It was embarrassing and humiliating. By the way, I will just point out that Fox News was using canned applause, and other media's right-wing media was using canned applause for the event because there was like nobody there. And, you know, nonetheless, it's just a sign, because this is the other thing I have to say. I think that part of the problem right now is that, and this is one thing No Kings was really good for, is that a lot of folks are out there thinking that there's no way that there's enough of us to overcome this. And I'm not going to tell you I know what the pathway to that is right now, although seeing Republicans call for his impeachment does give me a little bit of hope. But all that said, you know, it does belie the fact that the majority of people in this country, by a long shot now, are really opposed to what he's doing. There was another poll this morning that said, you know, the big, beautiful bill, the MAGA murder bill that we spent a whole broadcast last week talking about, that 60% of Americans oppose the bill. And, you know, there's like 20% that are in support of it, and the other 20% don't know a damn thing about it. So I just have to point out to all of you that his ratings are plummeting, that the parade is an indication of what's happening nationwide, just like No Kings is, that people are really fed up with the policies of ICE and the raids and the black bagging of their friends and neighbors off the streets, being sent to kind of like third-party places where nobody can find them. So one of the things that we have to do is kind of like take the signs as real evidence, right? No matter what they say, real evidence of where we're at. And there's an enormous amount of work left to be done. Don't get me wrong. Like, you know, I don't know. I mean, cracks in the veneer, like I said, are giving me great hope. Seeing huge MAGA podcasters calling for his impeachment is really different from where we've been. All right. You know, I will also just say that there's some footage out of Joe Rogan, you know, and I haven't taken the time to verify whether or not this is legit, but there was some footage circulating last week where he was talking about how the support of Netanyahu was amoral because of, you know, the fact that even as of this morning, the IDF is shooting people who are going to get food in Gaza. Like, they're dropping in humanitarian aid and then shooting people when they show up for food. So there's a ways to go on all of this, obviously, but I do think that the cracks are something very interesting. And I don't know, man, we're going to have to see where this goes. So my best advice right now is to take like a pause if this is all very overwhelming. Like I said, a lot of it is very, 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 very overwhelming right now. And it's hard to hold it all. And simultaneously, I think that the best way to do that is to check out of the news and to check out of social media and go do real work on the ground. Like, get on a Zoom call for your local immigration rights organization. Find out who's organizing for the next mass mobilization where you live, and talk to them and ask how you can help. Like, get in community with people who are doing really good work, because it will save your sanity at a moment like this. All right. That's it for today. Lots of love to all of you. And I will catch you all here live tomorrow and live on Thursday, which of course is Juneteenth. But here in my state, Juneteenth observed is the third Friday of June every year. And so my kids are off school on Friday, and I will be not broadcasting on Friday because of that. So live broadcast, obviously today, tomorrow and Thursday. Friday, we are off. Our office is closed. Okay. So just be forewarned, no progressive coffee hour, no broadcast on Friday. There will be a new educational training video dropping next Monday, but scheduling, it's the summer, people. So that's where things stand for the rest of the week. I will see you all back here live tomorrow. Please don't forget to like this broadcast and subscribe. Drop a comment on the feed if you're watching on the replay. Don't forget to pick up our handy dandy guide on how to lead change without burning out. Very important in this era. Very, very important. And I will catch you all here tomorrow. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.